Started on February 26th with the discovery of Mr. Hackman and Miss Arakawa and their dog at the residence. I just want to do a short recap and then touch on some new information.
Gene Hackman, one of Hollywood's most iconic and enduring legends, faced his final days in eerie silence. Alone in his Santa Fe home, the two-time Oscar winner was trapped in a fog of Alzheimer's, separated from his beloved wife, Betsy Arakawa, who had passed away days earlier. His last moments were shrouded in mystery, as no one checked on the couple for weeks. Hackman's body was discovered near his wife's, a haunting scene of isolation and confusion. Among the unsettling details, one chilling possibility remains. Did Hackman leave behind a final message, a desperate cry for help, written in the fading ink of his own mind? Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, a love story cut short by tragedy. Gene Hackman was no stranger to adversity. As one of Hollywood's toughest icons, his career spanned decades and left an indelible mark on cinema. Known for his gritty, commanding roles in iconic films like The French Connection and Unforgiven, Hackman was a man who had faced down ruthless villains on screen. He was celebrated for his raw talent and versatility, earning 2 Academy Awards and a reputation as one of the finest actors of his generation. Off the screen, however, Hackman's life was marked by a quieter, more intimate story of love and devotion with his wife, Betsy Arakawa. Together for over 30 years, their relationship was built on mutual respect, shared passions, and a love that seemed as enduring as Hackman's storied career. Yet, the final chapter of their lives would end not with the fanfare of an award-winning performance, but with a haunting and mysterious tragedy that raised more questions than it answered. On February 26, 2025, their bodies were discovered in their Santa Fe home, under circumstances that were as perplexing as they were chilling. Gene Hackman, at 95, and Betsy Arakawa, 64, had been alone in their gated estate, a place they had called home for years, nestled in the quiet expanse of New Mexico's Hyde Park Road. The discovery of the scene. It began as a routine maintenance check. On that fateful day, a local maintenance worker arrived at the Hackman Arakawa home, expecting to make some simple repairs. What he encountered was something far from routine. The home, once filled with life, now stood in eerie silence. The front door was unlocked, a detail that immediately seemed out of place, and inside, the house was in a state of disarray. In the mudroom, Gene Hackman's body was found, a cane fallen beside him, his beloved sunglasses discarded nearby. His lifeless form, once full of life and commanding presence, now lay still, a symbol of a life that had come to an abrupt and mysterious end. Just a few rooms away, Betsy Arakawa was discovered in the bathroom, her body positioned near a countertop. The scene was unnerving. Pills scattered across the floor as though they had slipped from her hand in a desperate moment. An overturned space heater sat near her body, adding another layer of disquiet to the already puzzling scene. The couple's 3 dogs were also found in various states of distress. 2 were barely alive, roaming the yard in confusion, while 1 dog was found dead inside the home, locked in a closet, a symbol of neglect and potential tragedy. The animal's condition suggested that they had been left unattended for an extended period, further deepening the mystery of what had transpired within the walls of the Hackman estate. Sheriff Aiden Mendoza was quick to describe the scene as suspicious. While there were no signs of forced entry or violence, the chaotic arrangement of items and the state of the home pointed to something far darker than a simple accident. Early theories began to swirl. Was it a gas leak, foul play, or something else entirely? The revelation of the cause of death. As the investigation unfolded, the initial mystery surrounding the deaths of Hackman and Arakawa began to unravel. On March 7, 2025, Dr. Heather Jull, New Mexico's chief medical investigator, released her findings. Betsy Arakawa's death had occurred around February 11, 2025, the result of a rare and deadly condition known as hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, a rodent-borne disease. Gene Hackman, her husband, had passed away approximately 7 days later, around February 18, 2025. The cause of his death was attributed to heart disease, compounded by the onset of Alzheimer's disease, which had been slowly taking its toll on his once vibrant mind. While the medical conclusion offered a sense of closure, it also revealed a disturbing gap in the timeline. The fact that Gene Hackman had spent 7 days alone with his wife's body in their massive 9,000-square-foot home. The notion that the couple had died in isolation, without anyone checking on them for an extended period, left the community and their family members grappling with a haunting sense of loss and confusion. The silent descent into Alzheimer's. Gene Hackman had always been known for his sharp mind, even as he aged. His daughter, Leslie Hackman, recalled how her father, despite his advanced age, remained physically active, often practicing Pilates and yoga. He had always been sharp with her and his family, and it seemed as though his mental faculties were still intact, even as he neared his 95th birthday. But Alzheimer's, that cruel thief of memory, can distort reality in ways that no one can fully predict. Leslie Hackman later spoke about how her father had been sharp during their last phone conversation, joking about a bad Western on television and remarking that he could outact the entire cast. Just days later, his heart would stop, leaving his family in shock. The idea that Gene Hackman, once a titan of Hollywood, was now lost in the haze of Alzheimer's, unable to recognize the reality around him, is a tragedy that cuts deeper than the most poignant of screenplays. Was Hackman aware that his wife was gone? Did he understand the nature of her death? The possibility that he spent his final days wandering the vast halls of their home, lost in confusion, calling out for her and receiving no response, is an image both haunting and heartbreaking. It's a tragedy not of violence, but of slow, creeping disintegration, both of the body and the mind. A haunting silence. What makes this story even more chilling is the absence of a clear explanation for those final days. As investigators combed through the couple's belongings, they discovered unsettling clues that painted a picture of isolation and confusion. Gene Hackman's pacemaker indicated that he had survived for a full week after his wife's death, a fact that stunned authorities and those close to the family. But there was no evidence of food consumption, no signs that he had attempted to cook or prepare meals. What happened during those 7 days in that vast, empty house? Did Gene Hackman, in the fog of his Alzheimer's, try to leave the house, only to return in confusion? Did he sit by Betsy, unaware that she was already gone, hoping she would wake up? The image of a man who had once faced down villains in his films, now struggling with the shadows in his own mind, is one of the most tragic aspects of this story. Hackman, who had spent a lifetime confronting danger and adversity, was now helpless, trapped in his own fading memories. The message left behind. Amidst the confusion and sorrow, one of the most chilling elements of this tragedy is the possibility that Gene Hackman left behind a message, one that, like his final days, remains shrouded in mystery. Investigators found 2 cell phones belonging to the couple, but there were no outgoing calls made after February 11th. This detail seemed to suggest that despite the devices being in the home, there had been no attempt to reach out to anyone, no plea for help. But then there was the planner. A 2025 planner was found, along with other personal items including medical records and household items. Imagine Gene Hackman sitting at his desk in the dim light, his mind clouded by Alzheimer's, yet still aware enough to perhaps scribble something down in that planner? Was it a note? A sketch? A final word? Leslie Hackman, in her grief and confusion, wondered aloud. What if her father's last canvas wasn't a painting of the desert sunset he had loved so much, but something darker? A storm on the horizon? A sense of foreboding? Could it be that Gene Hackman, in his final hours, left a single word behind? A word like help, written in shaky ink, not knowing who would see it? Perhaps it was a cry for help, a recognition of his own helplessness in the face of his fading mind. But whatever it was, the sheriff refused to release the details of the planner, and the contents remain locked away. It is there, somewhere in those pages, a whisper from Hackman's final hours, an eerie message that chills the soul not through loud cries or violent outbursts, but through a silence that speaks volumes. Leslie Hackman's heartbreaking realization. Leslie Hackman's grief is palpable in the wake of her father's death. In interviews conducted shortly after the discovery of Gene and Betsy's bodies, she shared her pain with the public, describing the shock she felt when she learned of their deaths. She had spoken to her father just days before he passed, laughing and joking as he had always done. In the last conversation they had, he had seemed in good spirits, making light of a television show he had been watching. But what Leslie didn't know was that just days after their call, Gene Hackman would succumb to heart disease and Alzheimer's, trapped in a world that no longer made sense to him. Leslie, torn between grief and guilt, questioned why she hadn't checked in more often. Why hadn't she noticed sooner that something was wrong? In her voice, there is a haunting sense of regret, a feeling that perhaps, if she had intervened, things might have been different. The idea that Gene Hackman, one of Hollywood's greatest legends, was left alone in those final days with no one to reach out to, no one to help, is a haunting reminder of the toll that aging can take on even the most formidable of minds. The ongoing investigation. As the investigation into Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's deaths continues, the questions surrounding their final days linger in the air like a dark cloud. While the official cause of death has been determined to be heart disease for Gene Hackman and hantavirus for Betsy Arakawa, there are still too many unanswered questions. What caused the prolonged period of neglect? Why were the couple's bodies not discovered until so long after their deaths? And, perhaps most haunting of all, what was Gene Hackman trying to communicate in those final silent days? In the coming weeks, investigators will continue to sift through the clues, analyzing everything from medical records to household items in an effort to piece together the final moments of a man who had once been a giant of Hollywood. Whether or not the answers will bring clarity or simply deepen the mystery remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: the legacy of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa is far from over. The love they shared, the mystery of their deaths, and the haunting silence of those final days will continue to echo in the minds of all who remember them.